We're very delighted to have Steve Mesler on the Performance Matter podcast today. He is a former bobsledder for Team USA, Olympic gold medalist in Vancouver in 2010 Olympics, and now I believe president CEO of the not-for-profit organization Classroom Champions. Is that correct?
Chair of the board now. I hired a new CEO last year.
Okay, got it. Okay, so Classroom Champions, they empower youth to thrive academically, emotionally through mentorship and everything else like that, which is fucking awesome. So I definitely want to kind of talk about that transition later on, but we'll keep things general to start. Like, just walk me through your journey a little bit. Like, what made you kind of get into bobsled first and foremost, and then we'll kind of just transition from there.
What got me into great to be here. It's fun to be home. Like, grew up across the river here in Buffalo. Getting into bobsled was kind of like a last resort thing for me, which is how a lot of bobsledders got into the sport. I was a track athlete. I was going to go to the Olympics as a track athlete, and that dream just wasn't working. I was hurt I was national champion in high school in the U.S. in pentathlon, indoor decathlon. And then went to University of Florida. Like, I went where you go, right?
Go Gators.
Go Gators. Won national champion basketball now. But the track team is amazing. And, I went where you go. That is there's not many better places to go than a good school and an incredible athletic department. And I just was an absolute failure for those 4 years. And bobsled was a last resort, throw something out there to get into it, because I just didn't want my Olympic dream to be dead.
You did. So walk me through, like, how did you go from track to, like, what, did someone recruit you? Did, like, you just reach out? Like, I go from, like, a hot sport to all of a sudden, like, ice and snow.
I'm not very smart. I literally reached out. Nice. I had a guy named Jerry Clayton. So Jerry's one of the best track coaches in the country. He's part of that. So there was Dan. So we were talking about Stu McMillan earlier, and we should go into Stu at some point here, just on Huberman, which is amazing. Absolutely. So super proud of him. So there was Jerry, Dan Paff, and a guy named Boo who was at LSU at the time, wherever Boo is now. But those three guys were like the knowledge holders. So Jerry had a guy before he got to Florida that was at Southwest Texas named Rob Olson, who went from track and made the 1998 Olympic bobsled team. And we're sitting at the track February of '98 in Gainesville, and Jerry just mentions that. He said, "Mess, you're just saying, very similar athlete to Rob," and I just laughed it off. Whatever, coach. Whatever. He was proud of his athlete. Made the Olympics, made it, and never talked about it again. And I was sitting on my couch in Gainesville, Florida, August of 2000, 2 days out of Tommy John surgery, four track seasons that I didn't finish healthy in a row at Florida. And I just did not want to think that my 17-year-old self was the peak of my athletic performance. And I reached out and sent an email to the U.S. Olympic Committee and said, "I'm this big, this strong, this fast. Can I do this?"
Holy shit.
Yeah. And I was at the lowest of lows. I was at that moment that every athlete has. Like, whether you're high school or high school or university, at some point you go, "I guess I'm done now."
I kind of wonder, like, gray area. Wonder if am I done? They don't want to accept it.
And sometimes it's murkier, muddier, and this was, for me, it was a real shit or get off the pot moment. For me, if I can say that. You dropped an F-bomb in our intro, so I feel like we're there.
Absolutely not.
I feel like we're there. It was that moment, and it was that, like, I'm super proud of that kid who sat on that couch, drugged up from his elbow surgery, who just was too believed in himself enough, even though all the data around him would have told him not to believe in himself anymore. But believed in himself enough that he hadn't hit his potential yet, and that he had something else to give, and that he, like, literally just reached out and put himself out there. And I still have that email was sent to me the day after we won our Olympic gold medal. Actually, it was forwarded back to me. We got received by a guy named Greg Sand, because they sent it from the Olympic Committee of USA Bobsled.
That's sick.
Yeah, it was awesome.
That's so cool. So then, again, like, let's kind of talk about the bobsled thing a little bit, because I am curious. So, taking your background in track, and then now transition to bobsled. So how did you kind of level up on that field? Because I think, again, just from some of the things we know about, that transition, they do tend to go for the track athletes and recruit them. And even like around here, if they do like their training grounds, like their scouting and their combine, they'll test these athletes on all these different metrics, and then just kind of like pick and choose, like, oh, you'd be really good at cycling. You should try out for the bobsled. You should kind of like get in touch with these things. So walking through how you kind of learned how to transition. Okay, like, I'm a sprinter. I got to learn how to bobsled, and then I got to learn how to apply these things well. So, like, kind of walk me through how you essentially make bobsled better for you. You know what I mean?
I think we can really take it from, if we step back a little bit, so the audience has an understanding of what makes a good bobsledder?
Yeah.
And what makes a bobsled go fast?
Yeah.
So you'll hear me talk, everybody will hear me talk all the time, like, what's the goal?
Yeah.
Everything is context dependent. Like, what are you trying to do?
Yeah.
So to go fast in a bobsled, you need to be able to overcome a lot of force and weight. Those things are heavy.
Yeah.
So strength is needed.
Yeah.
You need to be able to have in order to overcome that weight, you need a lot of ground contact time.
Yeah.
Because you can't just you're not a sprinter, you're not a football player in that way. You have a force that you are pushing against the whole time. So you got to be able to create that force against it, which only comes from ground contact. So you have to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. You have to be really fast because all of a sudden this thing goes over the crest of the hill, we call it. It's flat for about 15 meters, and then it goes down, and then it gets really fast. Yeah. So you need overspeed. Because you need to be able to continue to apply force as you are accelerating. Yeah. And in this case, going downhill, but you kind of overcome that feeling. It just feels like you're on the flat in essence to do that. So those are the things and then, oh, by the way, you need to be able to handle G-forces. So you need to be able to be like your back. Mm-hmm. And also you are applying force through your feet on the ground, and you're also applying, but that force is coming through your hands. Yeah. So you need a wicked core to be able to translate that. Because if you don't have a strong core, if you don't have concrete core, you're losing all of that power that you create through your hips and through and through everything else. It just becomes mush. You don't need necessarily, like a lot of bobsledders, you'll see them. People would often look at me and, you don't look like a bobsledder. And well, today it's true because I run marathons. Yeah. But even back then, I wasn't nearly as big as some of the other guys on the team, and not nearly as big as some of the guys now, because ultimately you don't need actually a lot to just hold that force. Yeah. You don't need a 400-pound bench press to do that. You're not actually pushing this way. You're locked in. Yeah. So you just need to be able to hold that force, which is a different strength. So that steps us back into like, what do you need to actually be? So then moving from track, and also mass moves mass. Yep. So
mass is gas.
Exactly. And in bobsled, not only is that true, the other kind of factor that's going in there is, so the sleds cannot weigh less than 210 kilos. Yep. But they cannot weigh more than 630 kilos. So you have this 420 kilo gap that the men fill in 4-man bobsled. So you want to have as little amount of weight. So you'd rather push a 210 kilo sled than a 215 kilo sled. Yeah. And you would rather be 627 than 620. You didn't tend to flirt with right at the top edges because scales are a little bit different. You could weigh in over at the bottom. They'll weigh you at the bottom with you and the sled and the gear and all those things. Yeah. So you have this like kind of gap in the middle there, and different sizes and different weights. So you need to fit in there. So you want to be heavier. So I was 182 pounds as a decathlete in Florida. Yeah. I was my biggest. I was 220. And I was probably settling in by the end of my career. I was probably 210 to 212. Yeah. And I was the lightest one on the team by. Kurt was, talk about the guys who came from there. Kurt was a football player in Nebraska. Yeah. He was by 25. Sorry, Kurt, I can't remember. Justin Olsen was a football player at Air Force. Yeah. He was heavier. He's about probably 230. Yeah. And then Holcomb, our driver, was a lot heavier. He's about 240. So I had to be a little bit on the lighter side. Yeah. As well. Yeah,
fill the gap with the other guys.
Yeah, so that's like kind of those are the goals. Yeah. So you got to have some mass, you got to be strong, you got to be fast, you got to be powerful, and you're doing it for 30 meters. Yeah. That's it. So adjusting away from a decathlete mindset where you had all these other conditionings and all this stuff. And again, I moved 2 years into the sport. I moved to Calgary to train with a guy named Steve Mesler, who is one of, if not the best sprint power coach in the world. And a long lineage behind him of where he's learned that and gained that knowledge. Was just on Andrew Huberman's podcast. Yeah. And Stu was still about less than 10 years into his coaching career at that point. So I was still part of that. He and I were iterating the entire time. And what you're trying to do at that point is you want to be really, as strong as you can be. Yeah. But you don't want to put on bad weight. So, we've got a bobsledder now, a guy named Cyrus Gray, Canadian, who lives with us at our house in Calgary in the off season. And we're having conversations right now because he needs to gain weight, but also you need to gain these things the right way. So we had to think about diet a lot, which we can go into. You had to think about how you're generating that power. You had to think about your conditioning. So you do need some kind of conditioning, even though you're only running 30 meters. Yeah. Because you need to be able to handle the training. Yeah. And you need to be able to handle, you're on the hill, warming up in the cold to push to to accelerate something with maximum velocity and force for 5 or 6 seconds. And then you're going down this just absolute insane G-force riddled wooden roller coaster. And then you got to go do it all again. You got to warm up again in the cold, on the ice, in the snow. So there is a condition that's needed, but you can't sacrifice the system.
Yeah.
So you're not going out and running even, we never ran more than 110 meters.
Yeah.
Our off-season conditioning was 110 meters, walk back, maybe 5 times. That's as much as we did.
That's crazy for something. Yeah.
Full power. So it was shifting my mindset back to your question really was, how did I shift my thinking? It was all of those things. Is understanding. I got to learn over time what to do. Now, what did that look like at the beginning? That looked like pushing cars.
That's sick.
I was at the Odom parking lot,
so damn sick.
O'Connell Center parking lot in 2000. My roommate, she was goalie in the soccer team, pushing her 2-door, whatever Lynn had.
Awesome.
And then, pulling sleds and sprinting, and then and again, I was coming off Tommy John surgery. So they called me Bowflex because I was doing strength conditioning coaching for the women's soccer team at the time, which in retrospect had like Abby Wambach on that team. So I was doing that with a guy named Ron Forbes, who was strength conditioning coach in Florida. Yeah. And then the intern's job during the day or whenever I could come in was to basically, I had to do manual resistance. Yeah. Because of my elbow, I couldn't do anything else. So I had to do all this manual resistance. So they just called me Bowflex because I was getting bigger and bigger. So I had to put on weight in that way. Yeah, it was a really neat switch, and it always kind of Mike Holloway, nickname's Mouse at Florida. Mouse has coached numerous guys under 20 seconds, numerous guys under 10 seconds, and was Team USA's Olympic track coach. He always used to yell at me because I would always power my way through. He would coach us in the sprints and the hurdles. And I could hang out with guys back then were John Capel, Bernard Williams, these guys that made the Olympic finals and medaled. And I could hang with them for 30 meters. They just had my 4th gear was my top gear. Yeah. And these guys had a 5th and 6th and even a 7th gear. So they would just accelerate away. But my power was always there. And he'd always yell at me for overpowering. Stop powering through the hurdles. Stop powering through these things. Yeah. Well, when I slid into bobsled, I was built. Yeah. I was built for that.
Yeah, it was a good transition. That's a crazy story. Starting from pushing cars and shit, that is just...
It was great. Yeah. It was great. We did all the stuff over the years, man. Like some of the training that we got into, because again, you're looking at these power systems. Yeah. In these ways that are just like, there was times where I was 215 pounds, so heavy for me. Yeah. And the most we ever got were 45-inch hurdles, so the 42s with the styrofoam on top. Yeah. 45-inch hurdles, 9 feet apart, doing double leg bounds at 215 pounds. Like that was a lot of that's a lot of power.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah, you don't see that. No, the athleticism I think is almost like underrated sometimes. You don't realize like how much goes into that kind of shit. Like it's really intense. And I guess on that note too, then I guess when you're looking back at those training years, right, getting ready for 2010, what do you think most people would misunderstand, I guess, about the concept of elite performance in that respect?
It's a broad question to think about because I think so many people have different ideas of that. But if you're trying to get to that level, and having gotten to that level myself, and then having been around people and watched other people around me get to that level, and then learning from other people, it's all consuming. Yep. And you have to get to a point that you realize that what you do matters. And that mattering concept seems really flimsy in a lot of ways. And I spend my time now in the executive coaching and leadership world, and it seems really flimsy. Mattering. Why should it matter? But if you don't deep inside think that everything you do matters, then you won't do all the things you need to do to get there. Which means that to me is like the core of performance no matter where you are. If you can start to understand that what I do matters, then you start to learn about the things you do because you realize it matters. Yep. And if you can, as an athlete out there, if you can start to realize that when you go to sleep matters and how you wake up matters, not just waking up at a certain time, but staying away from your devices at the time we didn't have the device issue back then. But in today's world, you do. Like, why does that matter? Learn about what happens. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then you start to change those behaviors. And that understanding that you matter then drives your behaviors. And again, I was fortunate to have Stu McMillan around me. I was fortunate to have a guy named Pavli Jovanovic, who has since taken his own life because he couldn't bring that level of performance anywhere else in his life. And I think that's a lot for people.
Yeah.
So, you got to be really, really good at understanding that. You got to be really, really good at taking your role in all of this really, really seriously and realizing that you're the one that controls all this stuff. And that's a hard thing to do.
It is, yeah.
Because it's easy to blame everything on everybody else.
Yeah.
And so, which means you got to be really, really good at self-awareness. You got to be really good at realizing what things that you are not naturally wired for, and not using that as a crutch, and actually saying, I still have to do these things.
Yeah.
So I have to go after it. And I think those kind of three premises are the biggest pieces that I think people miss.
Yeah, we talking to a lot of young athletes. I think a lot of them like the idea of that lifestyle. I think it's very like, catchphrasey words, and they're like, oh, these things matter, and they say, yeah, it matters. And I think really there has to be, I think John said last week too, there has to be a genuine curiosity as to why that has to matter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not just like, go to bed on time, eat right, train hard. It's like, okay, cool. But then the small things, like how you warm up and how you cool down, how you eat, what you eat, and then when you eat it, all those kind of small, intricate details where it might seem like you're splitting hairs, but really like there is a purpose. And I think if you have a genuine curiosity, you know what I mean? Like, I think that'll help because it's such a delayed gratification. There's not even a guaranteed outcome for you.
It's a delayed gratification, but it doesn't have to be. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Is if you get really good at understanding that these things that you do matter, and then you start to learn about them, you get a big kick out of doing them.
Yeah.
So you're actually like, your gratification comes from the moments where you're doing these things.
Yeah, small wins.
Yeah, and it gets platituded by saying, enjoy the journey, and the journey is more important than the destination. Bullshit.
Yeah.
The only reason you have the journey is for the destination.
Yeah.
You can't. You can't. That's the worst platitude to teach people, for people to think, is that the journey is more important than the destination. No, it's not, because the journey doesn't exist without the destination, and therefore the destination has to be at least of equal importance.
Yeah. And
keeping which goes back to goals. Like, what's your goal? I have this goal. That's my destination. That's the goal, and I'm going to do all the things that I have to. But the trick is not thinking, because if the Olympics, it's 4 years away all the time.
Yep.
The moment you cross the line and don't get what you want, I mean, in 2006 we got 7th place and we were supposed to medal.
Yeah.
And it was awful. Like, it was really awful. And we went through a hard 4 years. Like, the team just was hard, and I did not get along with our driver. A bunch of us didn't get along with our driver, Todd Hayes, and that's just like an environment that's really hard for 4 years in a row. You're living with people, you're training with people, you're racing with people, and you don't get along.
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, it doesn't work out. So you're not you're not enjoying the journry, and and you didn't get to your destination.
You didn't get to the destination, and you hated the way to get there.
And you hated the way, and you were there in traffic, in the rain, and on a gravel road the whole time. Like, that was the thing. So it can't just be, and it's just not natural to enjoy the journey. It's not natural. It's not. It sucks.
Yeah,
it's hard.
It's very romanticized, isn't it?
It is.
It's very romanticized.
It is. I mean, anybody who tells you that is either didn't accomplish their goals, so they want to feel better about not accomplishing their goals in the journey, or they didn't work hard enough on the journey, because it's really hard. So you have to find, but you have to find the joy in that. That's the thing, is you have to find the joy in it. So if you understand, to JB's point, if you understand all of the stuff behind it, understand that, then it's not a chore to eat certain ways.
Yeah.
It's not a hassle. You get your dopamine out of that. You actually get your high from doing it right. And also on the meal side, I mean, JB was a giant influence on me. I remember the first time I met him, he shows up in Calgary, 2004 maybe.
Yeah.
And we were at the Ice House. I vividly remember this summertime training. We're at the Ice House in Calgary, which is a big push facility that we can use and get on the ice in the summertime. And we had a working nutrition theory up to that point where nothing was better than garbage. That was our working theory. Why is that important? It's important because if you're on the Autobahn in Europe in between races and you haven't eaten for a while and you pass Burger King, the decision is, do you eat Burger King or not eat Burger King?
Yeah.
And in those, our working theory at that point was you didn't eat Burger King. You held out until you could get quality nutrition. And JB rolls up to the ice house carrying a bag of Subway, which is processed breads, processed meats, all those kinds of things. And I was like, Stu, who's this clown? Who's this clown you just brought up here?
What's this bullshit?
Yeah. And what is this?
You've been telling me all this shit, and this guy comes in.
Yeah, like this is our new like guru nutritionist. Come on, man.
With Subway.
And but you know, Stu gave a lot of deference and respect to JB ahead of that. So I gave a lot of respect and deference to JB. So when he says, no, I mean, you're better off. You're better off putting fuel in your body than not. In that moment, because we are not so proud of our positions, all we want to do is get better. That's it. It wasn't about our ego. It wasn't about the way we did things. People think it's the way that I do things, the way that you do things are better. You know what the better thing is? The thing that makes you better.
Yeah. What works.
What works. And that those moments change your perspective and your philosophies very quickly. And then you can like dive into it with them. Why does it matter and all those things? But sometimes you're better off to just trust people that you've learned to have a respect for over time. And that's the changes that you make. So we were thinking about it for us going into it, especially those last few years going to Vancouver, when we were dialed in. We had the team, we had the sled, we had the runners. If all these things that go into high performance, we get into how bobsled goes fast later. But you know, our diet and our nutrition at that point was, I had a thing on the fridge. That was the schedule, and it was aligned with what our daily training schedule was.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the same thing every day.
Yeah.
We knew Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays were much bigger. There were 2 a day. We were doing 2 workouts a day. In the morning, we were doing big power, warm up, some sprints, some hurdle hops, get in the weight room, lift, come back in the afternoon, and then a lot more sprints, and then get back in the weight room kind of thing.
Yeah.
So those days you're putting 6,000 plus calories in a day, which is hard to do. I mean,
it's a lot harder.
That's a job,
Yeah.
especially when you want to have as little amount of that be supplements and smoothies.
Yeah.
Like, because you're not actually going through the salivary glands, so you're not actually breaking it down in the way that you naturally should be. So the only times that we had at that point supplements were in training, because my stomach just couldn't handle other things. So it was in training and right after, when you just needed quick whey, boom, as much as you could get in there, and then you'd eat and go. But on the fridge was the meal plan, and it simply said things like lean protein, root veg, and vegetable.
Yeah.
And then we knew what fell under lean protein, fatty protein. We knew what fell under fatty protein. Yeah. And then we could choose.
Yeah, like a magic bag almost. Like, here's like your categories, and pick the thing that works for you.
Exactly. And it was all like, we didn't have, the only thing that we had that would be close to processed food would be, and that's the funny thing, is you see the anti-processed food movement is a big thing these days.
Yeah.
That was table stakes in high performance sport in the 2000s.
Yeah.
At least and table stakes with the Stu groups were pretty high,
Yeah.
pretty high level of table stakes back then. But the only thing, maybe 7 grain breads back then. That was it. Every single thing else that we were putting in our bodies was either for me, it was a lactose-free whey, a Gatorade powder. We call them JB smoothies because they were high. Like the carb to protein ratios were pretty sweet to handle in the middle of training. And creatine, I was into getting into beta alanine back then. A guy named Dr. Jay Hoffman out of UCF was like on the leading edge of all that, and beta alanine did great things for me.
Yeah.
So it was either non-processed foods, whole foods, meat, potatoes, beets, spinach, eggs, or it was a supplement for a very specific purpose.
Yeah. No, that's crazy. That's crazy. It's so cool to see that all just mapped out, how specific it can be, but at the same time, like, it's crazy because you're also working with humans, and humans have different tastes, different lifestyles, and all that kind of stuff. So it's good that you guys had like that freedom, and it's good that JB could accommodate and say, okay, listen, here's like the calories we have to hit. Find some way to just kind of get that in, and I'm guessing obviously like you noticed the difference, obviously, then I'm assuming.
Yeah.
It made a huge impact in your ability to recover and everything else, right? So then, what did a training day look like preparing for Vancouver? Like, what? Let's go through a fucking week, man. Let's just say like Monday through Sunday. What was the system like? let's go from like the broad picture
Mm-hmm.
and then kind of just dial into a training day because I'm definitely curious.
So we were so uh, we'll talk about off season and then in season.
Yep.
Very different animals. Very different animals because in the in season you are going down the bobsled track multiple days a week. You're standing around the track in the cold doing these things. You have to treat your body because ultimately, high level perspective, stress is stress is stress.
Yep.
And we learned that in a lot of different ways. And stress can be girlfriend stress.
Yeah.
It can be lack of sleep stress. It can be training stress. It can be, training load stress. It can be massage, chiro, acupuncture. All of these things were part of the holistic way that we were looking at. Because we were looking to do something. The U.S. had not won an Olympic gold medal in four-man bobsled in 62 years.
Yeah.
The Germans had basically won everything for the past decade plus. And so we were needing, in order to win, we had to be at the absolute top of our game as often as we can be. And you brought that with you all 4 years in that training cycle, and especially you brought that with you come April, May, beginning right around now. You brought that with you at the beginning of the off-season training, and it wasn't that. And again, I'm staying at the high level, like the principles we were going with, which was we had a principle of you could be ready to go within 4 weeks. So our training was you were never so far in the tank that if all of a sudden they called, we're going to testing in 4 weeks, that we couldn't be ready to have a semi-peak there.
Yeah.
So our overall training plan for that Olympic year was we had testing in September. So we had 2-wave peaks. So we had in the macro cycle, we were going on 4-week microcycles, more of the traditional 3 weeks, 3 weeks heavier, 1 week lighter with that, like middle and second weeks being big. Middle and third week being bigger training weeks. Yeah. And then the fourth week was a lighter week with like a couple days off in the middle there and just ramping the volume down about 60-70%. And then you're looking to peak in September. You just want to see that was how you made the teams in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Our team was settled at that point.
Yeah.
But you still wanted to show up. You were testing, and then you go back in the tank a bit, and then World Cup season started in November. At that point for us, it was less about World Cup season and more about just a straight peak for the Olympics in February. So we had that start in May 1st, call it, peak in September, peak in February.
Got it.
So on a daily or weekly basis, Monday and Fridays were absolute giant, massive power and strength days. So you're talking about you're waking up, going to bed at 10 or 11, waking up, getting 8 hours in bed.
Yeah,
that was the priority. We didn't have the devices as I'm wearing my Whoop. You didn't have the devices to see, oh, well, you're in bed for 8 hours, but you only slept for 7 hours. It was, and you slept pretty soundly at that point. All of us were effectively single. No one was worried about their mortgage. No one was worried about their next job, their promotions. They had no other stresses in their life. So this was it was the absolute. It was a performance environment that doesn't exist in real life.
Yeah, absolutely.
You had 4 guys, all knew what the single goal was. I said at the beginning, what's the goal? There was no other goal. This thing right here, that was the goal.
That was it.
That was it. I could give you feedback that would sound really bad, but you knew I was giving it to you because it was something I believed, and we would have a conversation about it. It was not personal. It was I need you to be at your top of your game, and I need to be at the top of my game. So we have to be able to give each other feedback. And sometimes that feedback was about training. Sometimes that feedback was about lifestyle and other things. And because it did nothing mattered except for this thing. Yeah. And that was beautiful. And it just doesn't exist. I've talked to military guys about this, and when they're in the field, it's like that. But then they come back to base and they got to call home and they got to check on and see if the bank thing cleared and say hi to the kids and all these other things. Yeah. We didn't have that.
Yeah, your environment was really catered to just that was it.
That was it.
Hey, that's almost like a fantasy nowadays. Yes. Like you have no rent, no anything. It's like you literally just you're living here. You're doing this thing. That's all you do. You don't have a girlfriend or spouse or someone you have to that responds.
I had a girlfriend at the time. Don't get me wrong. But when I say effectively single, I mean being a married guy with 2 kids now. Yeah. Having a girlfriend where they are not the priority, and it was really hard on relationships too. Yeah, of course. You could love somebody and they're still not the number one most important thing in your life. Yeah. When you get married and you have children, like those things they become. Yeah, it changes. That everything else is about them. Yeah. At that point, everything else was about this goal, and I'm so glad that I got to live that life. Yeah. And I'm I would love to go back there on vacation, but I wouldn't want to live there again now either. But it was a unique and special thing, which meant that everything was dialed in around that.
Yeah.
So in bed at 11, up at 7. Training was at I was always up no less than 2 hours before training. So breakfast, big breakfast. You wake up 7 a.m. Big breakfast. 6 eggs, maybe half egg whites, spinach. I was big into dry cured cottage cheese. I had a little bit of a lactose allergy, so dry cured cottage cheese and fruit. Go to training. Get to training no less than 15 minutes before training starts. Training starts at 9. No less than 8:45. For a handful of reasons, not the least of which to signal to everybody else. I was the team lead, so I was the one that was looked at.
Yep, big statement.
You get there and you roll out and you relax, because you do not want the rush of getting to training and being rushed to get to training, to barely get there on time or be late, and the cortisol spike and the stress spike that
doesn't
happens.
get talked enough. That does not get talked about enough. If people are showing up right on time, they're just trying to get to you and try to catch up.
If you're worried and you're worried about, then you're worried about it for the last 15, 20, 30 minutes going into training, and then you're rushing to get there, and all of those things are elevating these levels that are bad for you to try to perform.
It's taken away from it.
Taken away from it. So it was very serious. That was, and it's not and there was nothing. We weren't going to get fired. If we got there late. There was Kaylee Humphreys, Canadian and American, and her husband. They were always late, and they knew we were starting at 9 o'clock.
Yeah,
I don't give a shit if you're there at 9:15. That's not my problem.
Yeah, this is you now.
We're going to give you shit for not being there. But we're not waiting. Because we handled our stuff, and they just were always running late, and they just handled their stuff in a different way. And Kaylee's like a little sister to me, so I can give her that. Give her that. She's a mom now too, so I'm sure she's learning that the hard way. So breakfast, get to training early, roll out, relax, laugh a little bit, get your warm up in. Warm up is good 45 minutes to an hour on that Monday. And then that was going to be a big power day. So we were doing I mean, you were big machines. You had a lot to warm up, and you're about to do something at that point on a Monday morning where you're doing we were doing vibration platform and then big hurdle hops. So we're working up to 5, 3 to 5s to 8s, but we're doing big contacts, giant power production. Go into the weight room, jump squats. Maybe some power cleans, so all power stuff in the morning, absolutely. And then head home. And you're hammering a Berardi shake during training, which is a Berardi shake at that point, about 600 calories of protein, Gatorade powder, creatine, and beta-alanine. Go home, hammer another one as soon as training was done. Open up the second one as soon as training was done. Have one you milk on during training. Second one, as soon as you're done, your body's just absorbing everything at that point.
It's taking everything in.
Everything. I mean, everything in your body just wants more, and it's able to absorb it, and it's just why the high quality whey protein is, which still to this day, the standard. You hammer that down, you go home, and you're not hungry. And an hour later, you got to eat.
You have to.
You have to eat. You have to eat, because you are fueling the beast for the next session and recovering and putting everything, the amount of damage you did to your body in that morning session. The everything in your body and your muscle cells, without going at all that, is just wanting everything. So you got to shuttle everything else in. So you're gonna have your protein, you're gonna have your root veg, you're gonna have your spinach, you're gonna have some other things, and then you're gonna probably take a nap. So about an hour nap, give or take. Then you're gonna wake up, get moving, have a little bit more food, and then you go to training again. And then training, you get in there again 15 minutes early. Then you're going through your 45-minute warm-up, and then you're sprinting. So we're doing probably 5 by 3 by 30 meters with maybe 3 to 4 minutes in between reps. 30 meters, come back 3 to 4 minutes, do that again, and then taking maybe 5 to 8 minutes in between sets and doing that. So you're getting a fair amount of reps in at that point. Mainly always with the eyes. You're always you're doing that just to check and monitor where you are. And what you're doing. So you want to understand, what did you do the days before? And how is that affecting today? What did you do in the morning, and how's that affecting today? And you can constantly just monitor that by running through the automatic timing. And then you're getting in the weight room, and then you're going heavy. Power cleans. Different cycles will go between from the floor, from hanging. Then you're getting in squatting pretty big and heavy. And we got really, for me, by Olympic year, we realized that for me, slow and pauses were really, I was so wired from like a power perspective that you couldn't damage that. So we actually were doing 1.25 squats with like, anywhere from up to like a 3-second pause down to 1-second pause, all the way up until like 2 weeks before the Olympics.
Yeah.
When you normally wouldn't do that.
Yeah, it's not really common.
And in the years past, what we would notice was my best 30-meter sprints would happen in August, September, in the middle of heavy, slow pauses. We used to call it building a bigger engine.
Yeah.
And then you obviously get away from that stuff, right? You get but for me, my 30s in January and February were slower than they would be in August, September, and they should be fast. Everybody else's were faster. Yeah. So Stu and I just flipped it, and we're like, screw it, we're just gonna keep going.
It's working.
It's working. We're just gonna keep going. So I was the one that was doing, down, up, hold, down, up, like that. Yeah. And those things are
pulse reps and everything else.
Those things are just brutal.
So that day alone was like, okay, so you go in the morning, you do your power work, right? So you were in the gym and you did all your hurdle hops first, and you went in and you did your power cleans, and you're going back in the afternoon, and then again you're sprinting now.
Yep.
And then you said you did more power cleans and then squatting, everything else like that. And then you're just fucking shoveling food, even when you're not hungry.
Yep.
How did you I guess, because again, a lot of guys, even like guys we know, like football guys, like they're supposed to put on 20 or 30 pounds.
Yeah.
I think people don't understand, like, it is really hard to gain solid weight. Like, it's uncomfortable to eat that much. I don't even know if like the digestion, the bloating, and like, you have to eat all these calories, you need it, even though you're not hungry. Like, how do you force yourself? And then how do you like deal with like maybe being bloated and everything else like that? Like I'm very curious, like if you were shoveling food that way and you were able to go and clean and run, like did that ever like impact you?
Oh yeah. I mean, you did not want to be around a bobsledder's house bathroom on a regular basis. You're excreting. You have to. You have to. You're excreting a lot.
Just fucking blowing it up, man.
Yeah, you are.
Holy
and
shit.
was like, we had rules. You were going through so much food. There was a house that we had at one point. There were 6 guys that lived in this house.
Yeah.
We had 2.5 fridges. So we had 2 full fridges and then a half mini like bar fridge. You were not allowed to buy more than 3 days of food at a time. That's how much food was getting run through that house. Is you were not allowed. It was banned because
there's so much. I know what the Costco bill on that would be, man.
There was so much food. There was so much need. To do that. So that was always a problem. Yeah, it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah,
it's very uncomfortable. But what's the goal?
Yeah, of course.
The goal isn't for me to be comfortable.
Yeah.
With my gut health.
Yeah.
And you're having a lot of like you're doing a lot of stuff for your gut microbiome, you are. But there's only so much that you can do. You're giving it as much love taps as you can through supplementation. I didn't take very many supplements towards the end of my career. I just food was better.
Yeah.
And that was whole food was better. But taking stuff that would help gut microbiome was paramount.
Yeah.
For exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
And then you also had the challenges of we had chiropractor. So Tuesday and Thursdays were more of like GS, general strength recovery days. Maybe you do a little bit of upper body. You didn't want to get too big because the aerodynamics in the sled. We spent a lot of time in the wind tunnel, and we would test, and you could see you throw an extra inch on your traps.
Yeah,
more drag. That is more drag. That is slower, and you got to get around each other in there. And if you can't squeeze 12 pounds of shit in a 10-pound bag.
Yeah.
So you had to make sure you were 10 on 10. So if I had to squeeze my arms around Justin Olsen in front of me and his lats were too big because he was doing too many spread arm pull-ups because he wanted to look good, that was a problem because if my arms come through to hold on the handles and it squeezes him up,
I know,
he slows us down. And at 150 kilometers an hour, you can't afford that. You're talking about that was worth 2 or 3% of the wind tunnel, and that's the kind of threshold of stuff that we were looking at.
It's a split second.
If it was more than 3% in the wind tunnel, it was significant.
Yeah.
And significance meant like a tenth of a second down the hill. I mean, most Olympics are won by 1 or 2 tenths over 4 runs. So you're talking about 500ths per run.
Yeah.
Is the average difference.
Yeah, it adds up now.
So you are having to. Peak performance is about. It's about the details, but it's not about all of the details. It's about understanding which details are the most important.
Yeah.
And that's one of them is where your weight is. And also, by the way, if you're heavier up top and you're going through a bobsled turn like this, you have higher center of gravity.
Yeah.
And that is harder to control.
Yeah.
So that lower center of gravity was better. Now, there was some arguments that a higher center of gravity as you came through, So if you are coming through a curve like this and you have a low center of gravity, your center of gravity is carrying through the curve longer. If you have a higher center of gravity, your center of gravity is carrying through the curve shorter.
Yeah.
So there were some arguments to be made on that, but you couldn't do that at the detriment. So you're balancing center of gravity, mass moving through a turn, which is a real like physics thing to deal with, while balancing your aerodynamics, which were the like most important thing in all of those things. So you had to find those happy mediums through all that stuff. It was so many variables. That was the beautiful thing about bobsled. And then you had your runners and you had your sleds and you had the way mechanics and we worked with, like you're talking about shimming runners that like, you know, the radius of a runner is about your thumb. So it's not like a knife.
Yeah.
Because it's 1,400 pounds between this 630 kilos. So it's about 1,400 pounds with the guys in the sled going through 5Gs. So if you are talking about like 7,000 pounds of pressure on ice, and if the runner edge is too sharp, it would just stick in, right? And you just get stuck or it would just destroy the ice.
Yeah.
So you had to have that rounder, thicker piece there. So the runners made a difference. And the shape of the runners made a difference. And if a flatter surface, just like a skate, like a hockey skate, flatter hockey skate, it's harder to control.
Yeah.
It's faster. Like it's a speed skate then.
Yeah.
Same thing with a bobsled blade, like the runners on the bottom of the blades on the bottom of the sled. So you also had those things.
Yeah.
And then you had sanding those things, because if you have 1,400 pounds going through 5Gs, going 150 kilometers, 95 miles an hour, if you have a little scratch in that thing, the drag that creates over a mile of ice slows you down a few hundredths.
Yeah.
And if you're talking about the difference between winning a gold medal and not is 500ths per run, the amount of factors for you to have to and oh, by the way, then you had to train.
Yeah.
And by the way, you had to push this thing.
Yeah.
This giant sled, and for 1/100th of a second at the top, it was equal to 300ths at the bottom, give or take.
Yeah.
So if you could beat somebody at the start by 200ths of a second, you got a 600th start.
Yeah.
There was a whole bunch of other dynamics of the acceleration, the velocity that we were really good at that could counter those things. But it was just the amount of details that mattered in bobsled is, equivalent to football in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like in track and field, it's very linear,
Yep.
and there's a lot of details that matter, and they're all hyper connected to
Yep.
each. You have one unit, one person, a flat surface that is going to be the same every time, so you can really, that's like listening to Stu talk about sprinting. He can go deeper on sprinting than basically any other expert can go on anything, right?
Those details are just incredibly immense.
Yeah.
It's incredibly immense. Wow, okay, so you do your hurdle hops, and then you're doing your power stuff. So then, what do those other days look like? So, because again, was that like a everyday kind of thing, or was it what kind of undulation happened with that? This is obviously off season, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
So, I just want to keep stacking on that.
Yeah. So Monday, Friday, very similar days.
Yeah.
Basically, Tuesday we would do some recovery, was like more eccentric work.
Really?
So slow, hard, make you throw up prowler kind of stuff. And that was considered recovery. Because when you're trying, because we were trying, it was great. Guys were throwing up. And that's you were just building up so much lactate.
On your recovery day.
Yeah, on your recovery day. And then some core and strength. Wednesdays would be plyos, like bounding, more like moving. That was what I was one of the best at. It was just 50 meters and the grass, alternate leg bounding kind of stuff. Thursdays were more of a traditional recovery day, just GS, core, light back, some upper body kind of work. Fridays was that Monday over again. Thing. And then Saturdays would be maybe some more bounding, maybe some of in the early off season, maybe some of those 110s kind of stuff, and a little bit longer, maybe a longer sprinting, 50, 60 meters at that point. So, and then you got chiropractor Tuesdays and Thursdays. You had, and then massage one day of the week in there. You had acupuncture, and then you had Stu at the time was also very hands-on from a therapy standpoint. So, Stu was around with Donovan Bailey and Dan Paff, and then the guys who were basically creating the lower limbs part of ART in the early and mid 90s. Stu was there.
Yeah.
So Stu is at the learning all that stuff, and you're talking 10 years later. So Stu could watch me sprint, come back, get on the table. He could see where something was just a tiny bit off. He could work through it. I'd get back up, sprint again. come back to the table. So you are also constantly getting that constant feedback in therapy of it. And I mean, the feedback side of it, I think that's the other side from a high performance standpoint, is you got to be able to disconnect your personal from feedback.
Yeah.
This is like, I mean, I always say to people, I'm like, look, I moved to a foreign country to have somebody tell me what I did wrong 20 times a day. And, you know, and if he didn't tell me what I was doing wrong, I just assumed he wasn't watching.
Yeah. Yeah. That needs to be talked about a lot more. I think, especially the younger age athletes, I think maybe it's just like the age you're at, but they don't, they take it too personal at times.
How do they take it? Like when you give, like, what does that look like?
So we try to keep feedback very objective. You know what I mean? Very objective. And again, they can have good days and bad days and everything else like that. But sometimes I think they have expectations. So for example, if we're trying like a volleyball player, they have this number like, oh, I can touch 10, whatever, 10-6, 10-8 or whatever the hell it is. But they're touching like 10-1, 10-2 on average. Okay. So it's almost like, well, where did you come up with that conception that I could touch 10-8, I have to touch 10-8, all this stuff? It's like, well, okay, I get that, but right now you're not there. And then even like they touch 10-3 one, like, oh, this is great, we got somewhere. They're still like, oh no, I didn't do 10. It's like, well, I don't know where that kind of where'd that image come from, where like you're gonna be. It's almost like saying I'm gonna be LeBron James or Michael Jordan. It's like, well, let's meet you where you're at right now and set some goals for this, and then celebrate those small wins and those milestones, and not constantly be in the cycle where we're just gonna be negative every time about, well, you just made that number up because you think you should be able to touch it.
Yeah. You just decided.
You just decided like I should touch this. You're just like, hey, love the enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Love the ambition.
Yeah.
But let's break this down a little bit now and see what it takes to get there, and then
you're finding them getting, like, taking it personally when you give them feedback, either that's not a realistic goal or how they need to, what they can do to get there.
Yeah, so it's like we're looking at the mechanics and say, okay, like we need to be in like this position, like upright torso angle to hit this thing, and again, if we're looking at a vertec compared to like on-court stuff, for example, the mechanics are a little bit different. Like chasing a ball, trying to hit an opponent versus like there's a stationary thing, a long runway, get up there. They're different mechanics, right? So you give them mechanical feedback, which they're very open to, and then like when I talk about, I don't want to say realistic, but where we're at now, expectations. Okay, you have this number. Let's just say 10-8 is the example again. We're only touching 10-1, 10-2. Where'd you come up with that number? And then I'm not gonna be the one to tell you it's not achievable, but we just gotta, like, let's just celebrate the small wins to get to 10-3 and not be so hard on ourselves. Yeah. You know, when we're not hitting this thing that you came up with. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, and if we never get there, can we look and say, hey, like, you still got to 10-3, 10-4. Is that good enough for what you're trying to do? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like sometimes that's that conversation. You don't ever want to like shit on someone's ambition, someone's goal. Like, you're always trying to find a solution to get, to solve that problem. But it's always like, if we're not going to get there, you know what I mean? Or like you just kind of get that, you know what I mean? Yep.
No, and I think we would always look at things holistically. What did we do the day before? Mm-hmm. What did that morning look like? How was my sleep? And I could connect my performance to those things. And like I'd say to high school athletes a lot too, which is start to realize the things you do matter, which means when you went to bed last night matters. Yep. What you did during the school day today matters. What you ate matters. So when you come out here and jump 10-1 and you jumped 10-3 last week, it is and isn't connected to all of those things. Yeah. So, and then once they start to realize those things, then all of a sudden they're more conscious and intentional as they go. Yeah. And that's really the essence of performance, is just intentionality. Yeah. Realize the stuff you do matters. Yeah. And that you matter and your actions matter. It's not just what you did when you showed up. And oh, by the way, you were running a little late, so you were stressed as you were coming here, and then you had to, your warm up was a little bit, amped up, and you ran out of all of your adrenaline and all of these things. You ran out of that stuff half an hour ago, and you're just running on fumes in essence at this point. And here's what's happening to your body at this point. Yeah. And then they start to connect those dots, and that's such a neat thing. I'm starting to see that with my daughter. She's like 7.5, and she's into ski racing, and she's a really self-aware little kid at this point. She's not so little anymore. She's a big kid. But she's a bit introverted, and she, like, her surroundings are really intense for her. Yeah. And she started realizing that if we can get to either, her before school program or to the ski hill early, that it's calmer for her. Yeah. I asked her one day, it's like, why do you, she started getting into wanting to go early, which I loved, and I've been encouraging it the whole time, but all of a sudden
this makes sense.
I felt it clicked, but I think it clicked for a different reason. And it clicked because of her self-awareness, that she would get to these environments and it was crazy. And it was just too stressful for her.
Yeah, it was chaotic.
Too chaotic for her. She's too many sensory inputs for her. But when she'd get there and be one of the first ones, she's proud.
Yeah.
So having that pride at the beginning is really, really, it's a lot of nice things are happening in your body at that point. And then it slowly gets louder and louder and louder, and she doesn't even notice it then. So she's not getting stressed. But if you just throw her into a room full of kids going crazy, it's hyper stressful for her.
Yeah, things all ends.
Yeah, yeah, and she connected those dots on her own. I was really pretty proud of her that she's 7 years old and figuring that stuff out about herself. Yeah, because then it becomes, oh, this is why I didn't perform today, because we were late here and then this and this. And it's not about blaming, it's about starting to put those things together. Yeah. Because someday you're going to be late and you're still going to need to perform. Yep. But then if you're late, you can realize I need to keep myself dialed down. Yeah. I can't over explain to my coach why I'm late. Yeah. If I do, I got to just do it really simply. And I got to have a conversation with them about, can you please not yell at me? Because here's what that does. And I feel like I need to yell back and I get amped up. Yeah. When I get amped up, my performance suffers 30 minutes later. Yeah. And it's just creating that awareness. Yeah. And I mean, the same thing happens in the corporate world and leadership. It's the same thing.
Yeah, everyone responds differently and everyone has different feedback cycles and how they learn and everything else like that. And I think that is a great way of putting it. Is just that those small intricacies and having them make sense to them in their own regard so they can piece it together and not, if they don't get the outcome they want, it's not just good enough to be like, well, it just wasn't my day. I didn't get it today. It's like, well, let's dive deeper. Let's really get under the microscope as to every small step along the way in the last 24 to 48 hours and break down what was different from the last time this went well or went better. Yep. And then can you resonate with that at a deeper level and then take accountability for it? And
then what does that do to failure? It actually means none of these things are failures. Yeah. All of this stuff is just data and inputs for my next success.
Win or learn, not win or lose.
And then it becomes depersonalized. It's not that I failed. It's that I got to learn that if I do these things, I give myself a lesser chance of here. Okay, cool. Yeah. Which again, eventually, then you turn that into, as they get older and more mature and start getting more and more information, is look, the Olympic race, first day was February 26th, and the race was off at 1 o'clock. Yeah. It didn't matter what happened any time before that. Yep. There didn't matter. 1 o'clock, that was it. Your shot was at 1 o'clock. If you weren't ready, you wait 4 more years or wait the rest of your life. So you can collect all these things, and then eventually you learn how to mitigate those things, and you learn how to do it. So by the time Vancouver, and I was this kid too. Yeah. I was this kid in college. I was an absolute nightmare and wreck in college, and I was always looking for things that were hurting me. Yeah. And I can remember warming up, and because you're trained that if you have a little bit of a hamstring, then you go into the training room. Yeah. So I can remember warming up and just scanning my body, looking for things that were a problem. Yeah. So that I can go get them worked on. I got kicked out of the training room at University of Florida in December of 1999. I was not welcome anymore because I was a waste of student athlete trainers' time. Student trainers' times. Undergraduate athletic trainers. Yeah. I was considered and deemed a waste of their time.
That's crazy.
And they were right. Yeah. And they were right. I'm not saying that in a screw them, they were wrong. They were right. Yeah. And that, as I look back, that's a really wild thing to think about. Yeah. Especially when I went on to do. And also to think that that's a really big learning for me, because by the time the Vancouver Olympics came around, we landed in North America from our European tour. We'd been in Europe for 2.5 months for most of the season. We spent Christmas over there and trained our 4-man team because we didn't want to do the week home, week back from a jet lag standpoint. Yeah. You're losing 2 or 3 weeks of quality training at that point. We got back to North America and went to the Olympic Training Center in Chula Vista. I woke up the next day after that to 50 text messages and 100 emails because it got released that my parents got scammed. If you Google Mesler family scam Vancouver, you see all of these articles about my parents and my family and like the 10 people that they had staying with them got caught up in this housing scam that was taking people's deposits and first and second, third and fourth deposits. They lost like 8 or 9 grand at the time. That's stressful. To this thing, it was stressful. And my sister called. She's like, I know you don't want to, because the deal was like, I don't deal with any of this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not involved.
It must be tough for them too. Like, how do we tell you? Like, do we tell you?
So my sister called and she's like, I know the deal, but I think you're going to need to do something.
Yeah.
Like, I just think that you're just going to need to. But okay. So we eventually, like, I realized all this stuff. It was not good for me, but so we called, Lululemon was a sponsor of mine at the time. Yeah. And they were easy to work with than the Olympic Committee at that point. So we called the press conference at 12 o'clock on the Wednesday, like a week and a half before the opening ceremonies, maybe even 2.5 weeks before opening ceremonies. And at that point, there was no really bad news in Vancouver at the Olympics. Yeah. So they were just looking for something. And this was a good thing. This is an American Olympic medal favorite, family getting scammed.
Yeah.
We had a press conference from 12 to 1 on a conference call. And then towards the end of it, I just politely asked everybody, I was like, hey guys, thank you for being on here. Yeah. Like, thank you for being on here. Like, you shining light on this is going to be great. And I would really appreciate it that I got to get back to training camp and we're here to de-stress after a week after this. Yeah. And I'm going in my, what's likely to be my last Olympics. And I would really appreciate it if I didn't have to deal with this again. And the media were super respectful of that because I was respectful to them. They had to do a job and also that. So learning what the stress points are for yourself over time and experimenting them, reflecting on those things, and then being able to get ahead of those things and mitigate them. The Monday before opening ceremonies in Vancouver, the house that I owned with another guy, the basement flooded with black water, like the sewer went in, and he was not able to help. So I had to deal with this tenant who's needing to move out of their house 4 days before opening ceremonies of my third Olympics. Yeah. But again, I was able to keep myself disconnected from it and not get ramped up because I realized how bad all that stuff was for me. Yeah. And you can't change the things you can't control. And another big part of performance is control. What can I control and what can't I control? Yeah. And if you put those things, and there's things you can influence, but if you put those things in different buckets, as you are, coming up the ranks, you start to really, and just, that's honestly from a mental health standpoint, you start to realize, because if it's something you can control, then you get to action it. Yep. And anxiety is worrying about something in the future that you can't control. Yeah. And if you can start to understand that, then you go, okay, I'm not going to worry about the things I can't control because I can't control them. Can't control the weather, can't control how my mom and dad are acting that day, can't control how my teachers are, but I can control how I react to the weather and how I react to my mom and dad and how I react to my teachers. I can control that. Yeah. Cool. Let me see if I can experiment with how I react. Yeah. And then you start to be able to do those things and you start to figure out yourself. And that is such a giant step for kids and adults, frankly.
Adults do. Adults do. It takes practice, though. You know what I mean? It's one of those things, I think. And we were having a conversation the other day, and I think it goes back to your point where, if let's say for some kids know what makes them not stress, and perform and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Let's say some coaches are more loud or outgoing or whatever like that. I really respect kids that have the courage, even the younger age, come and say, hey, coach, let's say they're late and they had to get their ass chewed out or something like that. Hey, coach, sorry I was late, I was thinking about this, had a hard day at school. That kind of accountability is refreshing. Yes. It's fucking refreshing.
Yeah, I bet, man.
Courage is hey, that was, if nothing else, we're on the same page. We want the same thing for you. Yeah. We're on the same team. Yeah. You know what I mean? And all those bad days, coming late, whatever like that. And you had the courage to come up and be hey.
Those kids are going to be, those are humans that are going to be successful. Yeah. Whatever they want to do.
Yeah. That's the thing. It's and I think now, again, because a lot of young athletes and kids and everything else like that, and parents want to rush to their, I get it, they want to, rush to save their kid and everything. I was but let them practice some autonomy. Let them practice some self-advocacy. Yeah. Let them see how they handle, because again, if they're going to be in sport, they're going to have to self-advocate for what they need and what they feel, be more self-aware and advocate for that when it comes to their own coaches, because coaches have a lot of athletes to coach. Yeah. Everyone's different. So it's let them practice talking to a coach in authority, having those collaborative conversations, problem solving together, because everyone walks away and they win. So it's but if you just keep, and I want to say enabling, but if you just keep rushing in to say, well, point fingers like this, well, what are you teaching them at that point? They're losing a rep or two of practice where they can be in an uncomfortable situation, have that courageous talk and walk away I accomplished something. We were on the same page again. Yeah. Something so simple.
I mean, and it is as look as a parent now too. What's the goal?
Yeah.
What are we trying to do here?
Yeah.
And that's it. And like that's the most important thing. And if you can bring it back to that, then it gets really easy to disconnect.
Yeah.
That stuff. And you know, when parents spend a lot of time asking me about things like this and how to help their kids develop and all those things, and I always start with what do you want for them?
Yeah.
Like what do you want for them? And we had this conversation, and probably one of the more controversial things that I would say to people at the beginning, it's controversial, and by the end, it's not for them.
Yeah.
Is I don't care if your kid likes the sports they do.
Yeah.
I don't, to a certain point. And the reason for that is because what's the goal? The agreement is sports is good for kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's good for them. It teaches them all kinds of, teaches them goal setting, and it teaches them perseverance, and it teaches them resilience, and it teaches them teamwork, and it teaches them respect, and it teaches them rules. Like
Yep.
I think following abstract made up rules, like
Yep.
that line is out.
Yep.
Okay. Like that is sports. That's the essence of sports.
Fine.
Yeah. So like we all agree on it.
Yep.
Since we all agree on it, it's
Yeah.
therefore a rule. Like it's
Yeah.
completely, tennis, the line is in, and football, the line is out.
Yeah.
Why? And that's life though. Like most of life is set up in that way. So
Who came up with taxes?
all these things are, but we agreed on them.
Who agreed to this?
We agreed on them, and either go to the penalty box or jail. Same thing. So like, all right, okay. So we agree that this is the reason why you're doing that with the kids.
Yeah.
All right. Let me step back. Do your kids like school? Well, no. Do your kids like their vegetables? Well, no.
Yeah.
Do your kids like doing their homework? Well, no. Do you make them do all those things? Yeah. Like that. This stuff, and also, by the way, with sports, you're bad at stuff at first. And human beings do not like being bad at stuff. That is a very, very human thing.
Yep.
You're going to be bad at stuff. If you're likely going to be around people that are better than you. There's all of these things that are happening inside of you that tell you that you shouldn't like this. And there's a difference between not liking being new at something, or not liking having people around you that are better, or all these other things, versus not liking the sport.
Yeah.
But when you're 7 or 10 or 13, even going through hormonal changes, you can't tell the difference between those things. Like you just can't.
That is so fucking true.
And
holy shit, that
so
is it.
It really dawned on me this winter with my 7-year-old, where she hadn't liked skiing the last couple of years, and Brett is a really sweet, sensitive, probably slightly neurodiverse, can be introverted but loves being around friends and people, kind of kid. So she is hard to read at times, and also she's got pretty bad circulation, which is like her mom in a lot of ways. So it was really cold in Calgary this winter for a few weeks. Like we had one of those minus 20 cold snaps for 3 weeks. Like it just happens. It was just like the longest stretch that I've been there for over 20 years.
Yeah, it's a tough winter this past week. And I got boys in Calgary, and they were fucking cold. And cold for them, like that's cold.
Yeah, and it was 3 weeks of that. The first day that it was that cold, the ski team canceled practice. And she's at the level of skiing at this point where she's every Saturday, Sunday we're in Banff. Every Saturday and Sunday. And they canceled the first day, and they were like, Matt, we're back at it because it doesn't look like this is stopping. And I was out there with them. I don't get to ski with them as much anymore because A, they're better than me now, and B, that's the age that they're at, and then she's hardcore. But it hit me where there was 3 other kids who were all, and it had been pretty hard to get her out there the last couple months, and the last couple years. She hasn't liked it as much.
Yeah.
But there was nothing else I see her do, that at the end of a good day of it, she walks taller, she talks more, she laughs more, and she smiles more. That is why I knew it didn't matter whether she said she didn't like it, and she said it was because what it was doing to her. Lazy parenting is they don't like it, so I'm just going to let them not do it.
Yeah.
Active parenting is watch what these things do for your kids on a good day and observe that. And skiing was that for her. So we're out on the hill, and her little 3 ski partners, their feet were cold. Like everybody's complaining about their toes. Fair. It's minus 21 minus 21 degrees outside, and we're skiing. Freezing. And she goes, the others were like, but they were all happy.
Yeah.
They were commenting on their feet being cold, and they were happy. Brett was commenting on her feet, and she was miserable.
Yeah.
The signal was too strong. And I'm not wired that way. Her mom is, but I'm not wired that way.
Yeah.
And it dawned on me, I was like, oh man, like this poor kid, like this is not working.
Yeah.
So I go home that night and I order whatever the ridiculously expensive like heated socks are.
Yeah.
And all my man stinks, all my dad stinks say, suck it up. Say, do it. You gotta it'll make you tougher.
Just deal with it.
It'll make you tougher. and there's a whole lot of times where that's the appropriate response.
Yeah.
But I saw it in her and I was like, I need to separate whether she doesn't like being cold from whether she doesn't like skiing or not. This is a problem.
Yeah.
So I got her the expensive heated socks and I got her like an equivalent to like my glove, like a Hestra, like big time mitt for a 7-year-old.
Yep.
And the next week, man, and the rest of the ski season, she was happy. She liked it. She was smiling more and she crushed it.
Yeah.
She got better. She beat the kid this wonderful kid, River, who's just an awesome, amazing kid skier. Like these kids are like, little carving. Like when a kid grows up, a kid grows up in the Canadian Rockies, it's wild to watch how good of a skier they get. And we were out in Panorama, and she beat him, and I was proud of her. I was proud of myself for overcoming my inertia of what should this be versus what she needed. Yeah. And my wife like smirked. She's like, yeah, you accommodated her needs. Yep.
Good job, Dad.
Yep. I'm like, yeah, you're right. And it was such a neat thing to realize if I had stopped and now, and by the way, it changed her personality this winter. Yeah. She is a more confident kid. The teachers say she's more confident in school. I'm watching in real time what happens when you put a girl in sports and the barriers are taken down. And they are empowered and enabled. Like I'm watching it happen in real life in front of me to this kid who now is much more confident. Everybody comments on how much more confident she is, how she will look you in the eye. Yeah. She's always taken feedback poorly. She's taking feedback better now. She's not taking it so personally. And it's all because if I would have just coalesced after a couple of years of the appearance of her not liking skiing, this never would have happened.
Yeah, if you can go down deeper later.
For the parents out there, it's not kicking and screaming. And it's not that, but it is having an awareness that there's a difference in these things. That makes sense.
No, it does. And I think parents need to hear that. And I would never say it's ever like not well-intentioned.
Mm-hmm.
I think, but you're right. I think it's how do you kind of suppress, I would say the instinct, I guess, and just kind of rush in and just be like, okay, well, we're done. This is it. Like, not having fun. It's okay. But go deeper. Why? Like, is there something else? Like I said, it's not the sport. It was just a situation that was uncomfortable for a different reason. If you solve that problem, then the sport's good again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Like,
I mean, are you finding like, my underlying belief is that like people just they do like to get better.
Yeah.
They like to improve. And if they see personal improvement, that's like most of the game for most human beings. Like there's a natural instinct and there's a whole lot of reasons why there's a natural instinct for that.
Yep.
And there's a difference between enabling versus clearing some barriers when you observe it especially a kid who can't articulate those things so well. And there's a difference between like over accommodating versus actually accommodating.
Yeah.
And again, any kind of it's a light switch, especially for men, especially for dads, and we're wired that way. Like mom is the love and the compassion, and dad is the push out of the nest kind of thing, and that is a natural human evolutionary thing. And so I think for dads especially, and for men especially, it's a light switch. It's either I'm accommodating you or I'm not.
Yeah, pretty black and white.
Yeah, pretty black or white, as opposed to it's actually a dimmer switch. It's actually a continuum, and I can come a little bit here and accommodate this a little bit here and see how that lands. And I think I didn't really quite get that until relatively recently.
I have kids and all, so you're like, shit, maybe, okay, you're right, no, fuck, damn it, it wasn't what I thought, fuck, damn it, but good, but damn.
But also, sweet, figure it out.
Yeah, great.
Like, I'm more proud that I figured it out than I am, oh shucks, I was wrong.
Just fucking like, go me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's like, you gotta,
your own wins.
You gotta like, there's nothing wrong with patting yourself on the back every now and then.
Yeah, you gotta celebrate the wins,
especially when you overcome something that is hard for you.
Yeah.
Like, this is really, I mean, I went through depression about 6 years ago, and that like completely changed my lens on a lot of this stuff. To the point where, I mean, again, I've competed in the Olympics with 6 guys, buried 2 of them. So that is a real thing that's out there. And when you go through those life transitions, and it's neat to experience them, and to you kind of have these like most things in life are incremental. Every now and then you get to do the jump.
Yeah.
And you get to do a jump, and you see it happening, and you can look back on it. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah.
Well, fuck. I wanted to go back. So I want to talk about the Olympic day the gold medal day.
Yeah.
Right. Like morning.
It's one of my favorite topics.
Fucking right. Let's go through that day, the Olympic gold medal day.
Okay. So so the race is 2 days. So the first day is on 2 heats each day, all accumulated, all count. Day 1, the race is at 1:00 both days. So first heat's at 1, second heat's about 3. And we are, the first day, I'll go through the first day quickly. I remember nervous as could be.
Yep.
Like nervous. And rightfully so. And, listening to just some chill music, heading on the shuttle, because you take a shuttle, the Olympic Village, you take a shuttle to the track, which was, one of my first Olympics that I could just take general regular stuff, because when we were in Italy, we had to go outside the village, and we had to take 2 vehicles that an FBI agent was in each vehicle, and then police cars were in front and behind us. But in Vancouver, a little bit more of a Western safety net around us. So taking the shuttle to the track, and I remember going up, and I always would like to go out and just like smell before any race. Just go out, smell the ice, get to the start track of the push area, which was mainly our job as a push athlete. And it was really cool. Like my family had gotten up there super early, and they had a Team USA flag and a Florida Gators flag.
Nice.
One of my best friend, like my college roommate, was there with his wife, and I saw them there. And then they had the Steve on a stick thing, so they had laminated, printed off my face on these sticks.
That's awesome.
So it was really like comforting.
Yeah.
That helped that knot. And then we start warming up. And the difference between the team in 2006 and the team in 2010 was the team. In 2006, it was not a team. The push athletes were a team, and then the driver was separate, and it was like that. But in 2010, I remember going out there to warm up, and all of us are nervous. And Justin Olson I was 31, Kurt was 29, Holke was 29, and Olson was 22. Damn. So we had this big gap. He was still a frat guy, And we were jogging, and I walked up to Olson, and I punched him in the gut about as hard as I could. And he's just a big man-child ogre, laughs and goofs, and that lets that knot kind of go a little bit. I see Kurt, and Kurt's this Midwestern, corn-fed Nebraskan, and we just little thing like that. And I go to Holke, and if you YouTube the Holke dance, HOLCY dance, I would sing this ridiculous, like the Humpty Dance, like remix with Holke's name in it. The Holke dances, and he would stop no matter where he was, whatever he was doing. We'd been doing it for 7 or 8 years. He'd stop and do it. So that's the thing I vividly remember. Then we were warming up, and it's snowing. Snow is bad if you're the first sled off, because snowflakes accumulate in the track, and that slows you down when you're talking about all those hundreds.
Yeah.
And it snowed before our first heat in 2006 as well.
Like, oh.
But yes, but I let that thought came in and out of my mind real quick because I couldn't control it.
Yep.
So in, out, flushed it down, it was gone. And processed it, didn't just push it down, processed it. Nope, doesn't matter, out. And then first heat, pushes great, feels great. And we get down to the track, but we're the first off because we won the World Cup overall that season. So, and it goes off in rank order because you want fresh ice. It's like, think about a hockey, hockey ice. By the end of the period, it's all beaten up. Same thing on a bobsled track. Time 20 sleds go down. So every sled that goes down this track is slowing down just a little bit. Yeah. So the first heat, it goes first to the end, and then it goes reverse order. So it does balance off. Yeah. So we get down, but we have no idea how fast you're going relative to the field yet. And the second, the Germans come down second, and they're like 2,500s back, which is a mile in bobsled. Yeah. The average victory of a 4-man team over 4 runs accumulated is like 0.2 of a second. And we're up by 2,500s over the guy who had won. He had never lost an Olympic race.
Yeah.
The German, Andre Lange. He was gold in 2002 4-man, gold in 2-man and 4-man in 06, and was gold the week before in 2-man in Vancouver. And we're ahead of him by a quarter of a second. And then a couple more sleds come down, and then Canadians come down, and they're 2,300s behind us. And when the Canadian sled came down, that was, Kurt and I looked at each other and we were like, holy shit. Is this happening right now? Are we 2,300s up after the first heat? Like that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen anywhere, let alone at the Olympic Games, let alone on a fast track, which means it's closer.
Yeah.
Usually, like it's a shorter time span, which means it's gonna be closer, and we're up by that much. So we head up, do the same thing. I think we finished the second heat by 4,500s. Maybe we're up, give or take, which is a mile.
Yeah.
The year before, we won World Championships for the first time in 50 years for the country, and we won by 9,700s on our home track, which is unheard of. And Holke, our driver, Holke and I had said, and he was, Holke was famous at this point. He said, like, it's not going to be this easy next year. We're going to Olympic year. Holke and I are walking to the shuttles, and we're like, maybe it is this easy. And we both kind of laughed because we remembered the moment from the year before. But the second day is just, I remember it so vividly and fondly, where I didn't sleep very well the night before. Like, you come home and you got to do some runner work, so you have to sand your runners, and it's like an hour-long process. But it was happy for me because it was the last. I knew I was going to be retiring, so it was my last runner I ever had to do. And sanding runners is like you're trying to get any scratch out of that long metal piece, like to the point where you are starting with like a really rough, like 100 micron, going all the way down 100, 90, 80, 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, 15, 10, 5 diamond paste. And at every single grit, you're doing like 30, 20 times back and forth. And then you are taking a flashlight, taking acetone, wiping the runner off, and then you're taking a flashlight and you're looking through it for any scratches that are deeper than the scratches in the grit. Yeah. And if you don't see anything, you go to the next one. And then you go down, and then you're like, shoot, you're like 50, you're like, shoot, you gotta go back up. And then you gotta go, but you need to go the whole way. You can't just like spot scratch this little scratch, because it'll ruin the rock. So you're going through this thing. And we're watching The Hangover, believe it or not.
Nice.
In the Olympic Village, we're watching The Hangover because you just want something to make you laugh. Yeah. And that night, Kurt and I were really big into like Guitar Hero. Remember the video game? So we went to the arcade, and Kurt and I have a picture somewhere posted on my Facebook page, I think, back in the day, of Kurt and myself and one of the Italian guys playing Rock Band the night that we're up by like 4,500ths of a second. And I learned to speak German when I was competing. And we sang Du hast mich in German. I was on guitar and vocals singing Du hast mich in German with Kurt on drums, just to get our energy out that night. Yeah. And went to bed, didn't sleep very well, and woke up, was the first one up. Justin Olson was my roommate. Got up at about 7 a.m. Races at 1. It was earlier than I needed to be, and again, it was on and off. And I go into the cafeteria, and the whole coaching staff was over there. And I could, as I walked in, they were laughing and joking. And when I walked by, they all just went completely silent. It was the mechanics. It was Brian Scheimer, who was like a 5-time Olympian and an Olympic medalist himself. But like, we were about to do something that all of these people had been dreaming of since they've been in the sport. And some of them have been in the sport for 20, 30, 40 years. And I walked past them, and I went and got my breakfast, and I came down, sat down. They clearly hadn't said anything because they didn't know what to do. They didn't know where they needed to be for me. And I appreciated that. Like, they were there for me, and they needed to meet me. They did not expect me to meet them where they were in that moment. Yeah. They were meeting me where I needed them to be. Yeah. Which was really cool when I think back on it. And I sat down, and I was like, why the fuck are you guys so quiet? Yeah, who died? And they all just like started laughing, and I like, I've been having this breakfast with you guys for 10 years around European restaurants and all these things. I wanted it to be the same. Yeah. Like, on big competition days, my goal was always make this as familiar and homely as possible. Yeah. So we do that. We go to the track, and it felt like waking up that day and most of the day. Remember when you were a kid? Like I celebrate Christmas. Do you celebrate Christmas or Hanukkah? I was both, nice. But Christmas was special, right? Because like as a kid, it's that anticipation. You're pretty sure you saw like the Transformer in like your parents' closet. Like you're pretty sure you have the thing you wanted.
Yeah.
But you have to wait.
Yep.
And be patient. And like you're bouncing off the walls at 5 a.m. and your mom and dad told you cannot leave your room till 7, and you're like tortured.
Yep.
That's what the moment was like. This thing was under the tree.
Yep.
We were dominating people. We broke them. Like Kevin Kuske, Andre Longy's brakeman, and Kuske was in the sled for all those gold medals. The interview that he made the night before after the first day was they're all going for silver. So we broke them.
Yeah.
And that was pretty wicked. Yeah. Like that was the intent. The intent was break them. Like that is like so it is. You want them to understand they cannot win, because if they understand they cannot win, then they definitely cannot win.
Yeah.
And we had planned for that in so many ways going into it, in different signals that we did, in different ways we talked about our sleds and our paint. We had a different paint color. We had matte instead of a glossy paint, and it was really just a primer because we didn't let the mechanics send it back to give it the hard coat on it because the sled was so fast when we tested it.
Yeah.
But Holke told everybody it was a NASA paint. We wanted to put all the onus on all of the things around us that the Germans couldn't get NASA paint.
Yeah.
How could they beat us? They could push faster. They could get better lines. They can't. They don't have access to NASA paint. We're screwed. Yeah. So we tried to put things out of their control. Like we talked about. And then make them worry about things that are out of their control. And it all came together on that day. So the third heat of that day, we crushed them again, and we're up by I think 5,400s after that heat. And then at that point, the job is get down the hill safely.
Yeah.
Going into the fourth heat. So on the third heat coming up, so you weigh your sled at the bottom of the track, you put your sled on the truck, and then you take the truck up. So on the truck, I said to all the guys, no one has taken their protein powder. No one has taken any other supplements. None. Period. We all on the same page? And the reason is at that point, we're up by so much, the edge that any of your supplements that you take in between heats, the edge is 100th or 2. We don't need that edge anymore. What we need is to de-risk now.
Yeah.
Because we all know about contaminated supplements. We all know about it. And we've been taking all these supplements all this year, and none of them are contaminated in that way, but
just in case.
You're at that point, you were removing every single variable.
Yep.
And decreasing, you're de-risking at that point. And so I was like, we all on the same page? Because somebody has to think about those things.
Yeah.
Because that's the last thing that you need, is that you won by this much, but somebody's something was tainted, or something was contaminated in some way. So that's the conversation on the way up, is what are we going to do to make sure we're dialed in? And then I vividly remember just walking around a little bit in between heats, just taking it in and just going, like I'm gonna live the dream. Like, holy shit. And for me, it was the warm up, the dark, wet track, like parking lot, and then like rubber track they had where you walk outside and the whole tour is warming up. And then it goes 20-1 and you hear the crowd roaring as every start goes. Yeah. And there's less and less guys. At first there's 80 guys out there. And then there's 50, and there's 30, and there's 20, and then there's 10, then there's just the 4 of you. And everybody else is inside. And you are about to become, for one day, you're about to become the best in the world at what you do. And you put in the work, and you put in the thought, and you put in the effort, and these things do not happen by accident.
Yeah.
They don't. Like, you don't get to this point in that sport by accident. And it was a really neat moment for us all just to go, okay, let's fucking do this. And we did our last cadence together and pushed and sprinted off. And then we went inside and warmed up. And I finished our warm up, and you go and change, and you do all the other things you need to do. And one of those things was, for me, I was having glute firing issues at the time. So I'm going inside. I'm having Jason Ross, our chiro, is literally massaging my glute as I'm on my stomach, and I'm lifting my leg up like this, and then doing a bent leg like that. We're doing different activation things at the end there.
Yep.
And as we come out and we're standing up on the line, I can remember there's a thing that happens as you're helping athletes do this at this stage, right? You're helping athletes focus and get blinders on. There becomes a point where it is so automatic, and I didn't know, and I've had conversations with other athletes and fighter pilots and others at the top levels, that this happens where it flips. The inverse happens, where you are so dialed in that your nervous system is actually operating above red line. So I was as focused as I've ever been, and I could smell that they burnt the hot dogs over there. I could see the camera coming by. I could hear the crowd, and I was completely dialed in. I wasn't distracted at all, but then your nervous system just gets so wide open that it is ready for anything. And we push, and we have a solid push, and I can remember that was the first heat I could actually hear the crowd. And these bobsleds are loud.
Yeah.
And I could hear the crowd go as we came through, and I can hear as we came through curve, let's see, it would have been 11. Coming through 11 is this big right sweeping curve, and you're going 85, 90 miles an hour at that point. And I heard you as we went through this thing. But when you're going 90 miles an hour, that's just simply the first part of USA.
Yeah.
And it was somebody in the crowd yelling that. And I was processing this as we're going down the track. And you cross this line, man, and you see this clock that flips from the time to the place. And at the time, I wouldn't have been able, I didn't know what everybody else's accumulated time was.
Yeah.
But we crossed the line, and I looked up, and I could see the thing, the one, it happened to be flipped to the one as we went past it. And dude, it's all the things that you hope it will be in that moment. It is the accumulation of knowing that you did everything you could to do something and having it actually work out. That's rare. It's not that the other people in second, third, and fourth, and 10th place, it's not that they didn't do everything right. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I felt that I did as everything right as, and everything right, I think it's really important to talk about. Doesn't mean 100% of the time you were doing everything perfect. 100%, doing everything right actually means 90%. I mean, JB taught us that with diet. Doing things right meant that 10% of the meals you could have whatever you wanted because you didn't need the stress. It was actually, you were better only being 90% perfect, because that extra 10% perfect, the amount of stress and energy it would take for you to try to be that wasn't worth it. It was actually taking away from it. And that was such looking back on it now, 15 years later, I'm so proud of that kid who, for a long time, it felt like bragging.
Yeah.
And then you pass this certain point in your life where I'm like a different human being now.
Yeah.
And man, what an amazing opportunity that kid put himself into from that couch in Gainesville, not being willing to think that his destiny was tied to who he was in that point for those 4 or 5 years, and that he became a different person. When I told the story of being on the couch in Gainesville at the 2010, I keynoted the NSCA's national conference in Orlando in 2010 in June, and Brian Scheimer, the coach, came up from Naples, and I told that story, and he's like, I had no idea. I said, yeah, man, I wasn't coming in telling everybody in bobsled I was a fragile athlete. So I learned in that moment, you can change. You don't have to be who your past experiences tell you are.
Yeah.
You can just decide, this is the thing that I want. And again, this doesn't make, I would have thought this thing would have made me happy the rest of my life. It doesn't. So when I did all these other things in my life since then, framed. The goal isn't to exit this company at this point. The goal is what that's going to do for me, how I'm going to feel, and I can practice those things. And it was such a neat decade of dialing, playing, figuring it out, all the way to the point where we were able to do what we were able to do.
Fucking insane.
It really, I mean, coming from junior Olympic track and field at 11 to NCAA, and then going to Olympics where I was the alternate, and going to the Olympics where I got my ass kicked, where we were supposed to medal, and then going to the Olympics and actually winning. The appreciation I have for that, all of that, the whole thing, because I got to go through, and that puts a whole different frame for your entire life on what failure means.
Yeah.
Like, I understand that failure is simply the thing that happens before, at some point in the process, before you get the success you want. That's all it is. It's not the end point. And that's a really wild mindfuck.
Yeah.
Relative to the way most people think about those things, to have that be a pretty grounded perspective.
Yeah, it's powerful.
Yeah.
It's fucking powerful.
It is. Yeah.
You know, like it just goes to show like how much discipline, you know, and the perseverance and all those words that get so thrown around. But to hear you break it down, like those minute details, and be able to kind of compartmentalize those things differently, to, you know, defining what failure really is, to talking about the consolidation of stress, and being able to separate all those things. Like, those things matter so much, and I don't feel like they're talked about enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
do you think that, because for me, I'll ask the question with a bit of a statement, which was, people say sacrifice, and for me it wasn't sacrifice. It was, I was doing the thing I needed to do to be successful, and I found ways to really, like we talked about at the beginning, which was, it's not about enjoying the journey and suffering through the journey to get to the thing. It's about building in within the journey, about the joys of knowing that this thing that I'm doing matters, and therefore it brings me joy. So it's not that this discipline is shitty and it sucks. It's, I had more joy going to bed early than I did going out with my friends, because I knew what that did for me the next day. So it didn't feel like I was missing out on it.
Yeah, it's not really a sacrifice.
No.
It's not really a sacrifice at all.
When you're in the middle of it, it's not a sacrifice. It's doing the thing. And I think, you know, like, where do you think for youth these days in sports, like, again, they see all this stuff out there, and they see more of the shiny stuff than I ever certainly would have seen, ever. Yeah, like, where is how do you see it coming down to that for them right now?
I think they feel like they're missing out on something. I feel like something is glorified that might be, I wouldn't say easier to get, or more fulfilling. You know what I mean? Like, it might make them feel good. I think it's easier. And this other thing they're chasing, there's not really a guarantee. It seems pretty long term, like further away. I find people overestimate what they can do in the short term and underestimate what they can do in the long term. Yeah. So I feel like when they talk about sacrifice, I think there's just this negative connotation with all those things, because it means you're giving up on something that you think you'll like, or you think will provide you fulfillment, like, you know, staying up late and going out, or if they're college athletes, drinking and partying, all that kind of stuff. It's like, those may sound fun, but what does that mean to you? Like, what are you trying to get out of that? Like, if you ask the question, like, what did you want out of that? If you go out till 2 or 3 in the morning and are doing those things, what do you want from that? Is that going to satisfy that? And how does it line up with this? I think really it's not really sacrifice if the thing you're chasing matters to you, and you're able to, like you said, break those things, those small micro components to matter more. You're not sacrificing anything. You're just reorganizing your life for all those positive wins along the way. You're not really giving up anything else. And again, I think you have to have a good support system that hopefully can understand some part of that, not to the same degree, obviously, because everyone's different. They're not going to understand everything you understand, and support that. Because again, like, some sacrifice might be like, you're training that day, but so-and-so is getting married, I have to go to a wedding. It's like, well, I might not be able to go to the wedding because I'm doing this thing.
I missed a lot of things.
Exactly, right? So like, that might be maybe a sacrifice to them and everything else, but really, if you're kind of chasing your purpose and the ambitions, a lot of these things, I think there are things that I would categorize as sacrifice, like missing a wedding or something like that, or missing the birth of someone's kid because you have to do these things. Like you might not, it hurts to maybe miss some of those things in life, but it doesn't disregard that I have to do this. I think some other things get bucketed in with sacrificing, which really they're just shallow, smaller things that you think will bring fulfillment in a quicker, more temperamental way compared to these things that are apparently hard. Hard is, you can still enjoy hard things.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
These other things I think are easy and just.
And I think also, like, I don't want the kids out there or people, athletes out there listening to me to misunderstand. Like, we partied.
Yeah.
We partied. When the end of that 3-week training cycle going into the 1-week recovery, we got Sunday and Monday off. Saturday night, we were going out. We went out pretty hard. Like,
fuck yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we did. Like, I mean, when we race in Europe, it's a long race. It's a long, cold, dark winter. We race Saturday. We race Sunday. We were on the podium, and we're in Europe, where there's 5, 10,000, 15,000 people at a track. There's a party. You better believe we're going to stick around and have a few beers.
Yeah.
And have a good time. Like, and I think those things are not. And we did those things intentionally. You very, very rarely, I could probably count maybe a few fingers, the unintentional runaway nights.
Yeah.
Because they're intentional. When I say that is because you knew you had the next day off.
Yeah.
And the following day off quite often.
Yeah.
Where you had the next day off and you could also, the next day was just like an easier day.
Yeah.
And you wanted to enjoy the fruits of your labor. You wanted to enjoy the process. That was a choice that you're making.
Part of it.
It's a neat part of It's a neat part of the experience to do it. So I think that, like, I do not want people to think, because it would be 100% hypocritical.
Yeah.
Nothing also brought us more joy than whooping the tar out of somebody on a Sunday and having them see us go out and have drinks Sunday night, and them thinking, man, these guys are beating us and they're like out drinking. Perfect. I want you to think that, because you don't see the other 23 and a half
That's
hours.
all you see. Yeah.
It's the only, exactly. So we always wanted to put that there. And I do think that is, like, to your point, you make a great point about the things that you sacrifice and give up. And also it's really important. This is where compartmentalization as an athlete is super important.
Yeah.
It's also super important for athletes to understand that compartmentalization is a really, really, really good skill. Mm-hmm. And it's healthy and productive for you in times of focus and preparation and peak performance. It is not a really healthy skill for most of the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Like, it is a tactic and a tool to be used. And if you got to miss a wedding, and that's just because you can't get on a plane because you're in the middle of a big training block in the middle of Olympic year, whatever it is, and you do make that sacrifice, you have to compartmentalize that and put that away. You can't torture yourself with it and continue to feel bad and continue to tell people you feel bad and continue to tell your buddy you feel bad. And you can't keep putting that language in your head.
You're kind of growing the,
Yeah, you are ruminating on it in a way that is not helping you.
Yeah, you're giving more attention than really needs at that point.
And it's a good skill to learn because, again, you never know when your parents are going to get scammed 3 weeks before the Olympics.
Yeah.
You never know when your house is going to flood 4 days before the Olympics.
Yeah.
So practicing compartmentalization is really, really healthy. Practicing, we talk about this as, like, I'm a guy who will openly talk about mental health issues that I had. I'll openly talk about burying teammates. I'll openly talk about what those mean. People call that vulnerable. I more so call that transparent, because I don't. Yeah. Vulnerable means that there's a danger to me.
Yeah.
And I'm over that now.
Yeah, like the wording. I think it's just misconstrued.
Yeah.
Term.
And also, we're at a time now which is really great, where men are being encouraged to be vulnerable. It's really great, but it is just like everything else. It's a skill.
Yeah.
And it is a tool to be used at times, because as an athlete, vulnerability, as a bobsled athlete, as a men's bobsled athlete, and as a women's bobsled athlete, vulnerability is really, really bad. Like, there was 10 guys who wanted my job.
Yeah.
10 guys who would have been given anything.
Yep.
To be in my seat to have their shot at this.
Yep. And
they all thought they should be.
Yeah.
Like, that's the beautiful thing about a man's ego, is that we will always think we have a shot.
Yep.
And so I learned not to be vulnerable, because if you showed sign of sickness, of injury, of fatigue, the blood in the water, the shark should circle.
Boulder circling, man.
Man, I got into the rest of life, and that is a really bad, toxic. You're a bad leader with lack of vulnerability, especially when you've accomplished things and people then see you as not vulnerable. Like, it's really not good, and that stuff eats you up. It took me a good 5 to 8 years to really become comfortable in my skin, because also as an athlete, you leave the athletic world and you enter the real world, and there's a giant chip on your shoulder because you've been called a jock, and you've been called stupid, and you've been called lesser. You run a gym, you do these things, and people do not have the same respect as they do as the person who is, a middle manager at a bank even.
Yeah.
So you carry that chip on that shoulder, and that carry chip, that vulnerability gets put away even more and more. And it is when you think about the mental health issues that our kids are having, that athletes have, and those things, and it is because no one is teaching them that these are not things of who you are. These are not ways to operate in the world. These are simply skills that you use at different times for different purposes.
Yeah.
And if we can help kids, and if you guys as coaches can help, kids understand that this isn't the way you live.
No, it's not like, I don't think it's an identity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can't identify with this as me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
This is another skill that you have.
Yeah.
Like, you as an athlete are getting to learn this skill of discipline in a way that you get to get quicker feedback from your body and your environment and your competitors in a way that, like, most people don't get that quick of feedback. Cool.
Yeah.
But also there are also times for discipline to be toned down too.
Yeah.
Like, when it's become too stressful for you and you need to, it's just becoming too all consuming for you. And then that becomes negative and toxic in your brain and your body. And then that's decreasing your performance anyway. So you might as well just lower the discipline a little bit to get to the proper thing.
Probably right state there. That makes a good point. I think there's a level of humility that has to come back a little bit with, again, you nailed it, that vulnerability, because you're right, there are guys gunning for your shit. You know what I mean? Like, any day, like, you get hurt, something like that, like, next man up, like.
And if somebody goes faster, if they're whatever, but they get in there all of a sudden, then
it's like any football team ever. Next man up. You know what I mean? He does a good job. Okay, well, I guess he's staying in.
How many starting quarterbacks have lost their job?
Right.
Because
so there has to be that separation a little bit, and you're right. You hit the fucking nail on the head there.
I mean, I don't know if I'm right. That's just my take and my perspective and my understanding of human nature in a way that has been informative for me.
Yeah,
so that's
I would argue that's a pretty sound perspective, because you've done it, lived it, overcome everything else, and it makes sense, right? You've had those battles, and now you're in the real world, and you're able to separate those things and reflect on those things, and that is, honestly, we see that too. It's like, that is necessary. Like, that is the perspective, and especially at the younger ages. Like, like having to be able to compartmentalize those things, that is a skill which, we need to get more practice at. Yeah. We need to help them, enable them, empower them to.
You got to test. You got to test. You got an exam. You got an exam.
Yeah.
Like, those
aren't going anywhere. You know what I mean? Like, it's not changing.
Yep.
My lifetime anyway. Like, it's like, you just look at it as an opportunity. Like, it's not a negative thing. It's a challenge. It's a positive opportunity. It's an opportunity to practice. How do you handle this? How do you go about doing this?
And it is also how, not to go down, I mean, this is a whole different rabbit hole, which is, it is how our biology works.
Yeah.
So practice and struggle is how our biology works. So the myelin in the brain, and the way that the pathways get formed in our brain, that myelin, every single time you struggle and practice something that you're unsure of, it wraps another layer of myelin around. And myelin is basically the insulating sheet that goes around the signal pathways in the brain, to break it down that way. And so literally our brains and our evolution, our biology is tailor-made for us to struggle at something early, keep trying it and get better at it, and then create a stronger pathway that then creates mastery. It is literally how the brain operates. So it's not just a thing that's out there.
Yeah.
It's actually understanding, and again, that's where you get into mattering and understanding, which is the biology. If you miss the biology part of all these things, then you miss a lot of the meaning behind the mattering part of it. So when that's how our brains are structured, it tells you you should be bad at something at first. And then when you push through the struggle and suffer of it, you start to wrap these things around. It becomes a more and more insulated. Think about like a wire that doesn't have any insulation around it, and then think about a wire that has a lot of insulation around it, how much more efficient that wire is. That's what's happening in our brain, and that's how it's literally structured. Like you look at the myelin of a like 1 or 2 year old versus the myelin of a 6 or 7 year old, it's a whole different brain. Because the 1 or 2 year old doesn't have any patterns down. They don't know how to do anything yet, really structured, only a few things. And by the time we're 5 or 6 or 7, we actually know how to do most things. We can run, we can jump, we can walk, we can talk, we can listen. So we can do all the basics of the basic primordial broth of human behavior by around that like 5 or 6 years old. And then everything else is just sharpening the saw.
No, tell it to parents. I'd be like, what's going on? It's like, I'm helping the myelin in your kid's brain.
Yeah, there you go.
All right,
you're welcome.
Listen.
You're welcome.
Believe it or not, this is good. All right.
Yep.
It's for the myelin, damn it. We're doing it for the fucking myelin.
Right?
You understand what myelin is? I'll tell you. All right. You don't know electricity and wires and shit? Myelin.
I'm telling you, you put this in front of a 15-year-old kid and you actually get them to sit down and you actually show them this stuff, they will try harder at something that they don't know.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like, because now they get how
there's
it
something
works.
Objective that they can latch on to
Yes.
and be like, okay, like how I'm feeling is not just how I'm feeling, it's actually this. I'm working on this. How I feel is actually working on this.
Oh, and then by the way, like the way the biology works is that I'm also wired to stay away from the thing that will harm me. Because for hundreds of thousands of years, the human being or the animals before us that saw the lion that could eat us versus the person who was really good at seeing the blueberry bush and getting the food. Like you could see the blueberry bush and see the food, but if you didn't have like a high sense of awareness of what could be threatening to you, you died and you didn't get to procreate. But if you weren't somebody who was as good at seeing opportunity, but you were way better at seeing the threats, you could live another day to get the next opportunity. So by the way, your wiring is also set up to make you feel threatened. And make you want to go away from things that threaten you. And what threatens you? Being bad at something threatens you. You don't like it. Other people around you make you feel certain ways, which gets into the whole social dynamic of all these things. And when we actually just unpack and unravel it all and just lay it all on a map, and it's not, I'm not trying to coerce you into this. I'm trying to have you just understand what's happening and where these feelings come from. And those feelings come from like hundreds of thousands of years of evolution for you that you're not going to change. So you might as well just understand them. And I mean, there's all kinds of experiments that went on, like Carol Dweck and the growth mindset, where you just explain to kids what the growth mindset was in a set that they didn't. And the amount of kids, the way that kids challenged and pushed themselves in the group that were explained how it works and the ones that didn't, like these ones were way more apt to like push through failure and try to do something harder because they were taught how the brain worked, versus the kids who didn't, who succeeded at something. As soon as they hit something that they failed at, then they felt stupid, and then they went back. Same thing. And those are like 6 or 7 year olds they did that stuff with. Let alone teenagers who, like, I mean, that's when I work with kids now. Like we unpack it, and you don't have to take a 3-hour course on it. You can unpack it for them in 10 minutes. 1 or 2 things.
This is how you communicate. Like that extra layer gives them something tangible, I guess, that they can kind of latch on to. Maybe rationalize a little bit. Like, okay, you know what I mean? Like this isn't what I think it is. It's a feeling, but this is what actually is happening. And if I keep doing this, this can get better. Okay. I'll get better at it.
Right.
Like, okay, that's. I'll kind of circle back and wrap up with this. So like, saying all that and like your approach with working with young people and everything else like that. What do you think makes a good coach in your own experience? Like being the athlete, being the guy that did the fucking thing, and now kind of be on the outside now and helping the next one. What do you think makes a great coach?
It's a great question. And I've also been super fortunate to literally be coached by some of the best people.
You have a fun pedigree
in the world. Like, right, between Mouse and Stu and Jerry. And also Jim Garnham in Buffalo, and Patrick White in Buffalo as well when I was in high school. I think what makes a good coach, the best coaches that I've had, as well as the way that I coach executives on that side of things, is, I would say if I step back, let me think. So man, there's so many things. I think the best coaches are people who are able to show their athletes that they care about their success.
Yeah.
And it's a really hard thing to do that sounds so simple.
Yeah.
Because we push them and we want for them and we want for us for those things to happen because their performance is a reflection on us. So I think the best coaches in the world are the ones who show their athletes in some way and signal to them that they care about them and their performance, that they care about them.
Yeah.
I would say the second one are coaches who are able to deliver feedback in a way that is depersonalized, that is able to find the way for each athlete in a way that is able to actually allow them to hear that feedback, because they have to have that feedback. If you're a coach who has taught yourself to dial back certain feedback for certain people, you are not being a good coach.
Yeah.
It's not, this is the way I give feedback, and either this athlete just doesn't take it well, so I have to dial it back. It's your job to find the other ways into that athlete's psyche. And I think that's a thing. You listen to Stu McMillan talk, and that's probably the biggest evolution that's happened in his career, is he used to think that there was this way to do things, and he was trying to get the athletes to do the thing that this is the way you do this.
Squeeze them into that mold.
Yeah, and it was starting to get such a better comprehension of that, and that's hard.
Yeah.
Too. And I also say this, understanding you probably have a lot of youth coaches that listen to you that are doing it as a, not a second job, as a volunteer thing that they do on the side. And that's hard because how do you learn about all these other things when you don't have the time?
Yeah.
I think you listen to podcasts like this. I think you find those times if you want to be a good coach.
Yeah.
You can do that. So number one, you show your athletes that you do care about them and that they care about them and their performance.
Yep.
And those are sometimes two different things. Number two, that you are able to find the ways to get feedback to all the athletes that need it in that way. And number three is that you know when to listen to the athletes too.
Yeah.
So many coaches don't listen to athletes. You told a great story about the kid coming up and saying, hey coach, I need this and I need you to do these kinds of things with me. And again, especially our man stinks kick in. Women are a lot better at this. They're a lot more nurturing. They're a lot more empathetic naturally. Again, go back to the biology. But especially on the man side, is realizing that it's not a threat to you when a child or an athlete comes up and wants to talk about doing things differently. Stu and I talked about doing things differently. He was very against me doing pause and freeze squats and 1 1/4 squats through the whole Olympic year. But I was like, dude, this is something I need.
Yeah.
I need this. Like I need this. And he said, okay. And he literally, Olympic year, we don't usually change things Olympic year.
Yeah.
We figure out the first 3 years are about figuring out all your variables. And then if you find something that works, you actually just put it away and you bring it back out Olympic year.
Yeah.
With nutrition, with patterns, with movement and with training. And we tried something new Olympic year and it worked out. So I think, the best coaches in the world are the ones who can, to summarize it, the best coaches in the world are the ones who are able to show their athletes that they care about their performance and them as a person.
Yeah.
The best coaches in the world are the people who can get feedback into the brains and into the bodies of all athletes, not just the ones who can listen to them the way that they're good at listening to them.
Yeah.
And then the great coaches are the ones that listen to their athletes in ways that create the athlete feeling like they matter.
Yeah.
Like we talked about.
Yeah.
Because if this athlete doesn't feel like they matter, then that diminishes hope. And if you diminish hope is by definition, my actions today will make my tomorrow better.
Yeah.
Sounds fuzzy,
no,
but that's what you want. If you have an athlete that understands that their actions today will make their tomorrow better, everything changes for them.
Yeah.
And that's the definition of hope. And I think it's like such a great thing that you have been able to access and tap into all these great brains that you're able to get to. Hopefully my ramblings today were helpful for some of the coaches out there.
Thank you all for tuning in to the Performance Matters podcast. You can follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Big thank you to Steve Mesler for coming on the show today. We learned some great insights. We hope you all did too. If you want to learn more about Steve Mesler, you can follow him on Instagram. Okay, he's at steve.mesler. And you can also visit his website, stevemesler.com, or visit his organization, classroomchampions.org, to get in touch and learn more about some of the great things he's doing. Thank you all for tuning in. Until next time.